to try and hone in on exactly what are these supreme beings at the top of the pyramid, the puppet masters of the people, the architects of society, the engineers of the machine. And you'll find a lot of different people with a lot of different opinions. Tracy Twyman was a great guest a few weeks ago. She's of the opinion that demon entities like Baphomet and Cain are influencing the elite. A guest we have coming up in a few weeks, Gerald Clark. He thinks this otherworldly influence comes from the Anunnaki, who are still running the show after engineering us so long ago, based off what's been translated in the Sumerian tablets. And then today's guest, Jay Weider, who looks at the Nag Hammadi texts for indications of our reality, and they describe the archons, a form of non-physical, multidimensional parasite, described in the text exactly as you'd describe a psychopath. So it's funny, because we've been born into a system that rewards psychopathic behavior built by psychopaths, and one has to wonder if these nefarious folks are under the influence of something non-human. Whatever you call it, demons, archons, Anunnaki, aliens, I just can't imagine they would take occult rituals and sigil making and secrecy so seriously unless there was something there, some source of power that needed to be hidden away. And then below them, who are the humans on the next rung? Well, it gets a bit hairy when you try to pin it down, because you'll hear people say it's the Zionists, and yes, they wield a lot of power. Elite Jewish families seem to have a major grip on finance and Hollywood and global politics as a whole, but I'm not convinced they're our only problem, because guys like Olaf Phillips have me convinced that a Nazi presence may still exist somewhere in the shadows. And when you look at a family like the Bushes, it gets confusing because they're a German family who pushes the Zionist agenda. I think they've just been playing both sides, and the Vatican obviously has a seat at the table. I think we might have a Game of Thrones situation where no one is really loyal to anyone but themselves, and there's a lot of smiling and nodding while these men possessed just wait for a moment of weakness to go in for the kill. But the point is, I guess the reason I'm rambling about the hierarchy of ruling factions is that whether you're walking in the gardens of the Vatican or looking into the symbolism of some of Earth's largest corporations, I would say even looking at groups that seem to be in conflict with each other, if you snoop around long enough, I bet you can sniff out some coded references to Saturn. We've looked at this before in an episode with Troy McLaughlin, and we talked to Mr. Gates about his audiobook Jupiter, which talks about the symbolism of both Saturn and Jupiter. And today's guest, Jay Weider, has also gone deep into the Saturnian cults that rule the world, largely because of his work into Stanley Kubrick, and I'll let him explain the connection. But I wanted to give you a little bit of context about the Archons and the Brotherhood of Saturn, because we talk about some of this stuff in this episode as if it was a given. And my first show with Jay probably isn't fresh in everybody's mind. So it's good to get the gears working in that direction. And knowing that Jay's new movie takes place in a Mount Shasta setting, and there is a rich history of strangeness and paranormal activity there, I think this show is a pretty perfect blend for everyone. We've got deep-level conspiracy stuff with a little paranormal lore mixed in to keep it kosher. So enough of my hazy commentary. Let's just get down to business, talking about false flags, Georgia Guidestones, Lumerians from Telos, Saturnian cults, Lord of the Rings, reality manipulation, and a heck of a lot more with the man himself, Jay Weider. Alright people, we know the truth is a tricky thing, and today we're going to try to chisel away at it with one of my favorite guests from last year, Jay Weider, who is a wealth of information on all things weird, a well-respected author, filmmaker, and hermetic scholar. He's the man behind the wildly popular Kubrick's Odyssey documentary series, in which a third installment is coming out very soon. Back for a second round of awesome, the man, the myth, the legend. Jay, welcome back to THC.
Hey, it's great to be back.
Yeah, man, I'm psyched. Thanks for doing it. Something I've always respected about you is that you're very open about saying that your truth-seeking journey has always been very public, and as a show host on these types of things, I couldn't agree with you more. Sometimes I try to listen to a show from a couple years ago, and I can't even stomach it because I sound so dumb. But we're learning more and more all the time, and I think we can both go a lot deeper than we might have been able to even a year ago, so this should be pretty fun.
Well, I think there's an amazing thing going on in our, I don't know what you want to call it, the conspiracy community or whatever. And that is, we're all kind of coming to the same conclusions at the same time. And so the conclusion we had a year ago is not the conclusion that we have now. And so, and we're refining everything that we're looking at and seeing. And so, I said right after Sandy Hook, I got on, I think it was Jeff Rentz's program, and I said, we had to be careful that people died at Sandy Hook. Well, it's 2 years later, and guess what? I don't think anybody died at Sandy Hook. So, I cautioned people to be careful, but, I was wrong. I really now beginning to wonder if everything about Sandy Hook is just a fraud.
Well, that's interesting, because that was something I wanted to get to with you, because I know that you've been following it and looked at it very closely, and we're far away from the event, so I think a lot of the knee-jerk emotional responses have kind of subsided. But having looked at this so much, I mean, like you just said, you don't think that anyone died? That seems to be the kind of the more fringe conclusion.
Yeah, and I don't go towards that conclusion with any kind of glee, even though I'm happy that no one died. It's just that I have other information which one day I'm going to drop about the whole Sandy Hook affair, which is, I will drop soon the entire thing of it being Obama's 9/11. And I will show why and how, but not yet. I don't have my cards in a row yet, but I'm getting there. So eventually I will come out with something, a bombshell about Sandy Hook, but I'm waiting because I'm hoping that Jim Fetzer and Wolfgang Halbig and some of these other people can jam this thing loose so we can find out what's really going on.
Yeah, it is a really creepy event. And to think that no one died, yes, on one hand, you got to be happy that no kids were killed, but on the other hand, there are some scary implications for the amount of power these people have and their ability to shape reality. That's just as scary.
Even scarier. And I don't think we can allow them to get away with it. I just don't. I think what Sandy Hook was, I thought I'd taken the red pill back in 1989 when I first got into this stuff 25 years ago. And I was wrong. I didn't really take the red pill until January 2013, when I started going down the path of trying to figure out what happened at that school. And, the first thing that I discovered in my journey after taking the gigantic, huge basketball-sized red pill, was that the news media had been basically instructed to not cover Sandy Hook in any way, shape, or form, to ignore any real inquiry into it. And this comes from a post that's on the Columbia School of Journalism, a well-known school that turns out Marxist journalists. And it was saying that we should any inquiries into Sandy Hook should be ignored. Mm-hmm. And I thought, well, I'm a journalist, and that's not how I was educated to be a journalist. We were supposed to ask questions and question power, not accept what power gave us. So I knew it in January 2013 that the entire system had been co-opted. And what happened after that, I think, is actually probably the most important turn of events in the entire conspiracy community, because for months after Sandy Hook, from January until April, we were all arguing with each other about the events, and the people on the very far end, they just kept getting righter and righter. And it was really disconcerting because we were all after the facts of what happened and trying to collate all these things. But then you just start reaching the damning conclusion that is everybody in on it? And then came the Boston bombing in April 2013.
Right.
And I gotta tell you, the Boston bombing is, having looked at every available photograph over and over, examining them all over and over, I don't know, it's an even bigger fraud than Sandy Hook. Mm-hmm. Okay, so then what happened is that a lot of people after April 2013, they went, okay, we just had two huge events. And for all intents and purposes, they look like they're theatrically staged events. Mm-hmm. I was watching the Boston bombing. I don't usually watch TV, but for some reason on that day, I decided to watch TV. I turned it on. Within 10 minutes, the bombing had happened. And the first thing, I'm a former physical special effects guy in the movie industry. Mm-hmm. And saw that second explosion going up, and I went, that's not an explosion, that's a movie effect. Because it has a very white smoke and a very intense orange color about it. It's meant for visual. It's a way to make an explosion that's harmless but looks really visual. And it's a trick that we use in movies. And I got kind of worried at that point. But what happened in the conspiracy community at that point is a whole bunch of us went, okay, we just had two events that appear to be frauds. And both of them politically motivated. One for gun control and one to see if they could lock down a city without any protests. Mm-hmm. So I and many, many, many other people began going backwards. We began back engineering reality. We began looking at many, many events in the past. And going way back in the past, 20, 30 years in the past. And I can tell you that what we are discovering is that many of the events that we think are real in the last 40 years, especially after World War II, are fake. I mean, completely fake. At this point, I'm not sure the Zodiac murders were true. I'm not sure the Manson murders really happened. I'm not sure of a lot of things, actually. And the more I look, what I've decided to do as I back engineer reality is I'm looking at events, going back in time and looking at events, and what I've decided to do was look at events where everybody's handsome. Okay?
Yeah.
Everybody's good looking in the event. So, because the Tasnerev brothers were very handsome, and all the girls went crazy over the younger one, remember? Mm-hmm. He was on the cover of Rolling Stone and all that, yeah. The bombing kid. So started going back and looking at either events that involved well-cast, handsome people. And I think that's the key. And so I'm telling the whoever is putting on these events, could you start using, ugly, homeless-looking people?
Yeah, so, where are all the fat people? I thought America was full of obese people.
Everybody that you cast in your events is always really handsome and good looking. All the kids are just darling, and it's just like, it's time to get real. Life does not look like a Hollywood movie, guys.
True. And those two brothers that were apparently guilty, I mean, this is of all the events that we've seen in recent years, this one was the weirdest to me because the TV coverage was so sloppy. It didn't seem to have nearly the polish of their typical narratives. It was kind of like, okay, we got these guys, they're guilty, there was a little bit of a shootout, and let's just go. Let's just move on to the next story. Usually they glorify those people a little bit more, but it seemed like maybe there were too many holes in the story that if they covered it too much, it would come through.
Well, I think you're onto something there. I think, when I went on Rents in January 2013, cautioning everybody to be careful about Sandy Hook, I was then attacked by Salon.com, who wrote a really nasty piece about me. Alex Seitzwald is the gentleman who wrote the article, and it really upset me a lot. In fact, it's one of the impetuses for my journey of taking the giant red pill. And I began wondering why I was being attacked and surreptitiously linked to every whacked out conspiracy theory concerning Sandy Hook. It was the way the article was written. It appeared that I was progeniting all of these wacky conspiracy theories, including one that said the Jews did it, which is ridiculous. So I realized that this was the first time that I had been attacked, and I wanted to find out why, and that sent me down the trail. Well, at that time, January, February, Sandy Hook was getting a lot of coverage. Alex Seitzwald was a guest on Anderson Cooper a number of times, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So then came the first round of counterattacks by us, by the good guys. And And these were pretty good counter arguments to the official story and asking a lot of really good questions. And for the first time, the entire world was galvanized to find out what really happened at Sandy Hook, what really happened here. And thousands of people became unpaid investigators. It was truly, and still is truly, one of the most amazing things I've ever witnessed.
Man, and being a filmmaker and a film fan yourself, just look at Wag the Dog. They show you right there how to stage a false flag attack, and it's kind of crazy that that movie comes off as a comedy, and none of these guys seem all that nefarious, but that movie has it's a way more enlightening film just in the past 5 years. When you look at the events, you're like, wow, that's the template right there.
And I would point out that Dustin Hoffman played a film producer named Stanley, who faked the event, and then he dies.
Yeah, it all seems to connect. The elite are so calculating, and they seem to be following a script. They've definitely got these plans that have been going on forever. And one scary blip on the conspiracy radar recently was this update to the Georgia Guidestones. Have you seen that?
Well, I have, and I want to talk about that because that goes right in with everything else that we're talking about.
Yeah.
Well, first off, we don't know when, but at some point, someone got up on a ladder and cut a little niche into the English-speaking stone of the Georgia Guidestones. Now, I filmed at the Georgia Guidestones in 2005 and 2006, and I went back to the History Channel in 2008, and the niche wasn't there. I've got my photographs. So sometime after 2010, this niche, and you can't cut a niche into limestone without making a lot of noise. So this niche gets cut into the limestone of the English-speaking side, and interestingly enough, there's a camera there, so we should be able to go back and see who cut the niche. Anyway, I didn't know the niche was cut, but suddenly, in August, late August this year, somebody, again with a ladder, went up there and stuck a stone that had been carved perfectly to fit the niche. And on the stone it said 2014. Mm-hmm. Now again, we should know who did this act of vandalism, right? Because there's a camera there.
You would think.
Yeah, well, of course, you have to. And I'm sure the authorities and the police are, searching to find out who this person that did this is. I'm sure they're going through every single photograph and video that they've got. Yeah, okay, so anyway, so the stone is up there, and it causes a huge sensation. I mean, everybody's freaking out because it does feel like they're about to do the culling or kill off 6.5 million people and leave a world of 500 million.
Right.
And the world does feel like that right now. It feels like something is about to happen, something big. And I think everybody feels it.
Yeah.
Anyway, so last Saturday, they decided to take the stone down. Somebody did. There's a YouTube, and thank goodness the woman was there getting it on her cell phone camera. We may have never seen this. So there's a state trooper there, so that's proof that they're definitely concerned and they're investigating. And there's a gentleman in a red shirt who says that he's been hired to, keep the Guidestones intact, and you got to wonder who's paying him, if he is getting paid at all. Anyway, he has a big, huge ladder, and he crawls up and he pulls the stone off the niche, and he brings it down. And the woman, fortunately, cell phone camera in hand, gets all the stone. We find out that there's not just 2 messages on the 6-sided stone. There's 6 messages, 1 on each side. Get the stone right in front of the state trooper now. I know that state trooper is going to confiscate that stone as evidence for the vandalism that he's investigating. So I'm waiting to grab that stone and carefully put it in a towel and take it back so we can see where it was carved, because you can start tracing and do forensics on it, right?
True.
Oh, that's not what happened. What happened was the guy with the red shirt, who is very, very good mason, I might add, takes his masonry chisel and within about 10 seconds or 15 seconds breaks up the entire stone. But fortunately, we got the cell phone camera footage, and it's been uploaded. Mm-hmm. So we have 6 sides. We got 20 and we got 14. Then we've got the word jam. Then we've got MM, and then we've got a 16 and an 8. All right? That's what we have on this stone that was carefully carved and inserted into the niche which appeared somehow.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, what does this mean?
Right.
Well, what it means is this. A MM means Master Mason. That's the signature of the guy who made the little stone. Okay?
Okay.
Jam is a Masonic term for placing a stone into a niche. Okay? It's what he did. He jammed it.
All right.
He put the stone in the niche, and he signed it with MM. So those two are the act and his signature. So they're really not all that important. But the numbers are really important. So the numbers are 8, 14, 16, and 20. So what does it mean? Well, 814 is the month and the year that the niche stone was put in place. That explains that.
Mm-hmm.
And the 2016 is now that are the most mysterious. So what is this saying? Well, that the niche stone has been placed right next to the 500 million number in English is a very significant thing. And so what does it mean? Well, in my opinion, the Master Mason has told us the time period of the culling. How long this period is going to be until they hit their goal of 500 million. I can think of no other reason for doing this entire thing. And I know, and I think you probably do know also, that this group believes that if they tell people ahead of time what they're doing, they are somehow now karmically free of the damage that's about to be done. In other words, it's up to us to see what they're saying to us and to take matters into our own hands.
Right, yeah.
They're giving us that one out. And they do that all the time. Every single event they do, they foretell us, whether it's the Lone Gunman show that was broadcast in April 2001, telling us about what was going to happen in September 2001, or any number of things. So Sandy Hook in the Batman film on the map. So we know they do this, and so they have done it, and they've done the ultimate, and they've told us. And I think your listeners should consider what I'm telling them very soberly, because somebody went to a great degree of expense and trouble to put that stone there, and that stone is now gone. And I believe that the person who built the Georgia Guidestones is the person who built that little odd niche stone.
Right.
And he is the Master Mason. And he is giving us for those who are aware and for those who pay attention, he's giving us a very, very, very important piece of data.
Man, that's fascinating. I really didn't know that about the other sides of the stone, and I wonder if we were even supposed to know, or I wonder if...
I don't think we were. I think this woman who got the cell phone footage, she just happened to be in the right place at the right time. And they took that stone apart so fast, I mean, it wasn't even funny.
Well, that's when you were telling me that story, there were a couple of things that raised my eyebrows. I'm like, I wonder if this is stage 2. I wonder if if the whole breaking down of the stone was just some type of, actors playing out for the YouTube video that they were going to upload later and to put it out that way. It's tough to say, but I mean, things get so hairy in this area that you just don't know what's to believe anymore.
Well, I would believe you on that, except that does not explain why. Listen, they cut that niche into the stone, into the slab at some point. That's huge.
Yeah.
Can't begin to say how huge that is. It had to be pre-planned, and again, just because we have the Lone Gunman series featuring the airplanes being directed by the Pentagon into the Twin Towers, and just because there are actors involved in these events doesn't mean that there isn't still a message. And I believe what I believe is that I'm just going to tell you what I believe.
Sure.
2008, I think it was 2008. I may be wrong on that. There was a meeting in New York called, and it was Oprah, Bill Gates, Warren Buffett, Ted Turner, and a bunch of luminaries got called into this secret meeting. And according to the rumors on the internet, they were told that the depopulation plan was, Oprah was there too, that the depopulation plan was about to begin. Supposed to the rumors, Oprah got very upset at this news, and they kind of were, kind of patting her on the shoulder. Oh, you're so sensitive, Oprah, and Ted Turner was there.
Mm.
He's one of the richest guys in Georgia, and he's also a Mason. And when I was doing my film 2012, The Odyssey, which came out in 2006, which was the first major media piece on the Georgia Guidestones, I interviewed the editor of the local newspaper, Elberton, Georgia newspaper. And he told me that the Guidestones were built by Masons. Now, that was the first time that anyone had ever connected the Masons to the Guidestones. So, I believe that Ted Turner is R.C. Christian and that he built the Georgia Guidestones. Now, for many, many reasons do I believe it. First off, he's from Georgia. The Georgia Guidestones are in the highest place in Georgia. But he's also been a depopulation guy for years, encouraging depopulation and saying there's too many people, and a super environmentalist and all that. And I believe that he got word that the event was starting, and he made the stone and put it up there.
Yeah, that is a super compelling narrative. It makes a lot of sense. It's very scary that would show up on the English-speaking side. I wonder if similar stones will show up on the slabs of the other cultures.
Well, there's no niches in those stones.
Yeah, that's something to watch for.
Yeah, the niche appears.
Look at that.
Your life. Why can't another stone go up on that niche?
Yeah. Man, that's a fascinating narrative that I haven't heard anywhere else yet, and I think it makes so much sense. Definitely not what I planned to start this thing with, and that's definitely a little heavy, but I was going to ask you, when I was getting prepped for the show, in that classic synchronistic fashion, I learned that you recently also released a feature film that revolves around Mount Shasta. And I just so happen to be taking a trip through the Pacific Northwest next month, and Mount Shasta is very high on my list of places I want to see because there's so much mystery and paranormal lore surrounding that area. It's crazy. And I hoped we kind of could talk about that a little bit. I mean, can you tell me about the movie or the process of being there and in that area and making it?
Yeah, the movie's called The Last Avatar, and it's coming out right now. And we're putting it in theaters. It'll be out on iTunes and Amazon and everything soon enough. And it's about the return of Kalki Avatar, who is the 10th and last Avatar incarnation of Vishnu, who comes back. He prophesies to come back and destroy basically the Illuminati. So, and I was living just north of Shasta while I was coming up with the idea for my movie, and I got very interested in the lore of Mount Shasta. Started buying a lot of books, go down to Mount Shasta, which is really an amazingly beautiful and powerful place, I might add. And started to go down there and buying the books in the bookstores and reading about the Lemurians who are believed to have escaped disaster and live inside Mount Shasta. And there's supposedly a city called Telos. And supposedly from the time that white people have been settling in the area, and even before, because the Native Americans warned the white people there were these beings that lived inside Mount Shasta. And then there's these reports, consistent reports from the people who lived there of these kind of tall, very handsome people that are seen in town wearing odd clothing and frequently paying for things with gold, buying like something that's worth, $5 and paying it with some gold that's worth $300. And so these rumors are consistent. There's a miner who said he accidentally fell into a pit on Mount Shasta and walked into a giant cavern that was filled with tons of minerals, and he actually mounted an expedition to go back, and then he mysteriously disappeared. There is so much for this area that has almost no people in it that it's just like, if there's this much smoke, there has to be fire. And I started looking into it, and I decided that I would, for the sake of a fiction film, I would present a lot of this lore in the movie, which I do.
Man, yeah, it seems like a perfect backdrop for that kind of film. It's such an interesting place, and it's so, in a time when Hollywood has run out of ideas and is recycling everything under the sun, there is a hotbed of interest that hasn't really been touched.
Yeah, exactly. And what I'm really grateful is we've been showing the film to focus groups to see, how to advertise for it and what people like and what they don't like. And they're coming back, 95% extremely positive. So I'm really happy, and I don't pull any punches in the movie. I mean, I go for the jugular. I explain what's going on, who's running the place, what we have to do. I go into the archives. I go into everything. So, and it's a feature film. Neil Donald Walsh, who wrote Conversations with God, plays Count Saint Germain, who's also been sighted on Mount Shasta several hundred times.
Right. That was another thing I was going to ask you about, the Saint Germain character. Can you tell us a little bit about the legends and the stories behind him showing up there?
Well, it's just really interesting. Of course, Count Saint Germain really, really, truly lived. It was rumored that he had been seen, in different places in Europe for 300 years ongoing. And he never ate, he never drank wine, and all he did was sit at the tables with the monarchs and the kings, because he was a very aristocratic man. He was a count, and he would discuss things, and he would imply that he was very, very old. And then he would have a white powder, which he would be seen occasionally taking. So a lot of people thought he might be an immortal, or at least a person who had lived a long time, and he certainly wanted people to think that. Well, what's interesting is that the rumors then said that Count Saint Germain had left Europe around the time of the American Revolution and gone to America, because he said this is the place that was being prepared by the Brotherhood of Light for the Enlightenment, and he wanted to be there for it. Well, interestingly enough, when you start reading the lore about Mount Shasta, you find that the White Brotherhood is the name of the people who live inside Mount Shasta, and they're these tall, very pale-skinned people that may or may not be remnants of a civilization that existed in America a long, long time ago, and so starting in, like, I believe it was the 40s, the 40s, the rumors started that people were meeting this guy up in Mount Shasta who said he lived down underneath the mountain, and that he would come out, usually at night, and he said he was Count Saint Germain, and that he was prepping the world for a grand awakening. And so the movie, my movie, Last Avatar, is kind of the fictional version of what he was saying.
That's awesome. The stories that are so interesting to me, the most compelling is that idea that there are people coming out and going to local shops with those old coins, old gold coins. Yeah. That just sounds so intense and interesting.
Well, that's from an LA Times article in 1938. A travel article in their travel section.
Man, the fact that the New York Times would write about that is really off the wall too.
Well, they won't do it anymore, but yeah. So UFO sightings, Bigfoot sightings, odd angel sightings. It was amazing, the kind of stuff. So what I did was, while I was filming, and I actually show this in the movie, I discovered that all underneath the entire plateau, underneath Mount Shasta, is these gigantic lava tubes. And I actually got into these lava tubes. And these lava tubes are huge. They're, 20 to 70 feet in diameter, and they're round, and they're hollow, and they run for miles. And I realized that anything could be in these. Anything. And I started, and I didn't get down there much because I was filming. It's pitch black in these things. There's, anything could be down there. And how many layers of these lava tubes are there? I mean, we don't know. There might be, 20, 30 stories of lava tubes crisscrossing all the way down, going down 100 miles even. So we don't know what's down there. We know that there's these lava tubes and that anything could be living in these lava tubes, but we don't know any more than that.
Damn. Yeah, I mean, I've heard about those cryptid sightings and stuff too, but the fact that you've seen them firsthand and described how big they are, that's definitely large enough for a ship to fit through if there are UFOs coming in and out of that area.
Absolutely. And again, the mountain is so huge that if you flattened it out, it'd be like the size of some states. And it's very difficult to navigate. And so there's only, the set paths that people take when they're hiking up to the top of the mountain, and then nobody ever really kind of goes anywhere else on the mountain. And on the other side of the mountain, the eastern side, man, there's nothing. There's no farms. There's no ranches. There is nothing for hundreds and hundreds of miles.
Yeah, and another weird aspect is I've heard that there are people who've seen a large military presence there, which when you describe how empty the area is, it seems odd enough. And obviously a military presence is always going to make me a little suspicious.
Well, there is no military bases anywhere around, but on that east side, where there is nothing, no ranches, no farms, nobody living, no roads except one road. And guess what the name of that road is? Military Road.
Wow.
Yeah. So I'm suspecting there's an underground base right there, too.
Man. I'm so happy to talk to someone who's actually been there because I hear people mentioning vortexes and changes of energy. Did you experience anything like that when you were there?
It was so powerful there that I actually decided to chuck about half the scenes that I originally planned to film at Shasta, and I filmed them in Oregon, just because the vibe was so high that I just could not concentrate on making. Yeah.
Wow.
It was just like super vibe.
See, that's awesome because obviously in the conspiracy world, a lot of it has to do with energies and things that you can't see. And I haven't had a lot of validation for myself in terms of energy. And it would be awesome to go to a place like that and experience something intense like that to just get that validation.
Yeah. A lot of people go there and never leave. I know a lot of people that have done that. I mean, never leave. Once they're there, they just never go anywhere. They're done.
Wow. Is there a certain area there where if someone was going there seeking weirdness, is there a particular place or anything you would recommend they go to?
There's I forget the name of the kind of the New Age mystical bookstore, but that's a very cool place, and they have all the books. One thing I did early on researching for the movie was I went to the organic co-op store there, a very cool store, and I put a note on the bulletin board with my phone number saying if you have any weird stories that you'd like to tell, call this number. Mm-hmm. I got inundated. I mean, I wish I'd never done it. I had to get rid of my cell phone because it was just, I got so many phone calls and so many people telling me their stories that at a certain point I just had to pull the plug on the whole thing. But I got a lot of good stuff for my movie out of it, and that was good.
Wow. Did any of those stories stick out to you as more compelling or memorable to you?
Yeah, there's odd similarity to the stories of usually a single woman hiking somewhere up on the mountain and seeing a man. It's always a woman seeing a man, and then the man walks up to her, and the man is again tall with really blue eyes and pale skin, really handsome, and he just stares at him with his blue eyes for like 20 minutes, and then he walks away. I heard this story from so many women, I just didn't know what to say after a while. And they said that as he approached them, they felt this tremendous, almost sexual energy coming from this guy, but they never felt threatened by him at all. In fact, they wished they could see him again, and they couldn't figure out exactly what was even happening, but that, well, while he was staring at them, they were paralyzed.
Man, if there was one theme of the day, it would be wary of handsome people. That's so crazy. And this is going to get a little bit weird, but you hear these stories about Mount Shasta being somewhat mystical and energetically powerful, and it's funny that a corporation would name a soda Shasta, because I just heard this breakdown of 7-Up, where their logo is a red dot, and you have 7 chakras, and then 7 chakras up, alluding to enlightenment, and in both cases it seems like they're trying to invoke the tone of some positive spiritual practice or magical spiritual place on their logo and marketing, but they're essentially putting poison in the can.
Yeah, you're exactly right. I wouldn't touch that stuff with a 10-foot pole.
I wouldn't either, but I'm kind of addicted to soda, so it happens. But,
Yeah.
So to switch gears a little bit here, last time we talked a whole lot about Stanley Kubrick and how he very well might be the man who helped them stage the moon landing footage, and that he might have been trying to tell us about some of this in his movies, and it's super fascinating stuff. But what didn't come up was the Brotherhood of Saturn, and I've recently had a few guests who point out this vast symbolism of Saturn in our culture, which shows these secret orders must be pretty powerful. But there's also a Kubrick connection here too, isn't there?
Oh yeah. Brotherhood of Saturn is endlessly fascinating. My good friend Troy McLaughlin, I'm going to be seeing him when I go to England next week. Looking really forward to meeting him for the first time and talking about the Brotherhood of Saturn with him. My take on the Brotherhood of Saturn is, of course, a little bit different than Troy's, because his is more of a scientific view, although I have to say his Tower of Babylon interpretation is, I believe, spot on.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, so I came across a book many, many years ago. I'm going to forget the author's name, so forgive me. You probably look it up on Amazon. It's called Fire and Ice, and it's about the Brotherhood of Saturn, the real group called the Brotherhood of Saturn. And what had happened is that some of the Brotherhood of Saturn was a secret society, and some of their material had gotten accidentally released. It was found, I think, in a flea market or something, in a file that was inside a briefcase that was being sold. And the author of Fire and Ice got this material and started reading it and decided to write a book about it. And so I read this book. And I hadn't read the book for years and years and years, and it was after I started doing my research on Stanley Kubrick in the early 2000s that I reread the book and got it out of my library. Don't know why. I read it. And as I was reading the Fire and Ice about the Brotherhood of Saturn, I realized that the goal of the Brotherhood of Saturn, the basic stated goal of what they wished to achieve, was exactly represented in the movie 2001: Space Odyssey. They literally wanted to go to Saturn and redeem mankind and make man into a god, and then come back and change the world, which is exactly the plot of 2001: A Space Odyssey in the book by Arthur C. Clarke and Stanley Kubrick. Stanley had to change the mission to going to Jupiter, he says, because making the rings of Jupiter proved to be impossible for the special effects department. I believe that actually he was told that he had to change it because it was too obvious. Also, what I realized on my reread of Fire and Ice was that the rituals of the Brotherhood of Saturn, the rituals that they used to achieve their goal, was exactly revealed in Eyes Wide Shut. And then I knew that Stanley was probably a member.
Wow.
And he had turned his back on them, you might say, by making Eyes Wide Shut. And maybe he realized that their goals were not goals that he was in parallel with. And that maybe why he built the big wall around his estate in St. Albans. That may be why a lot of things are going on. And so I have reached a conclusion that the bad guys, the people that are that did the Georgia Guidestones, the people that are maybe starting the culling right now, the people who run the world, just start looking at them and realize that, first off, just like the Brotherhood of Saturn, they had their origins in Germany. All of them, whether they're Nazis or Zionists or the Skull and Bones, which had its origins in Germany. All of these, may I suggest, are not separate secret societies. They just appear to be separate secret societies. Mm-hmm. That they're all part of an umbrella society called the Brotherhood of Saturn, and they create these satellite secret societies as what would you call it? Flypaper to gather up people. In other words, your predilection, you might be Catholic, and so you want to join Opus Dei. I might be Jewish, and I want to join the Mossad or the Zionists. A German guy might be wanting to join it, but he'd want to join Skull and Bones. In other words, there's many, many doors into the mall, but the mall is the Saturn death call. And and so I believe that everything going on today, especially in like the showbiz world, the music industry, movies, they're openly and blatantly declaring that they are the Brotherhood of Saturn. There is no doubt. Everything from Katy Perry's Dark Horse video to Madonna at the Super Bowl to many movies that are out. They're all about the Brotherhood of Saturn. Sexualizing children. This is one of their goals. Mm-hmm. Saturn's goals is sexualizing children. Getting women to basically be whores is one of their goals, one of their primary goals. Mm-hmm. And the destruction of the family, the destruction of Christianity is their number one goal. They really, really hate Christianity, which makes me rethink Christianity.
Right. I was just going to say, I've always kind of thought that Christianity itself, or at least in its more modern form, is mind control in itself. The Vatican, of course, is guilty of 1,000 crimes under the sun, but it is strange that they would be attacking something that I would think would be one of their satellite groups.
Yeah, what I think is going on, and I'm glad you kind of brought that up, well, because we know the Vatican is just covered with Saturnalia symbols. Mm-hmm. And Saturnalia, of course, was the big celebration of Rome, before it, quote, converted. And so Rome itself was kind of obsessed with Saturn and all of that. And then we have J.R.R. Tolkien going down into the basement at Oxford and reading all the medieval literature that only he could read because only he had the linguistic ability. And then he writes, in the early 30s, he starts writing Lord of the Rings, which is a book about how Sauron, who has an all-seeing eye, is trying to take over the world by gathering up all the gold rings. And again, he's the Lord of the Rings, just like Saturn is the Lord of the Rings. And I think he knew about the Saturn death call, and he was secretly telling us about it, and that's why he named it that, knowing that eventually there would be that allusion to Saturn.
Wow.
And again, think about it. The ring gets heavier and heavier as Frodo gets closer and closer. Saturn represents lead. That's the metal that it's associated with, right? Lead gets heavier and heavier. It's the heaviest of all the metals. there's just too many strange allusions to Saturn and things in the Lord of the Rings for him not to have known about it. And I believe he knew a lot more than he let on.
Oh, yeah. I really think so, too. Man, but Jay, fascinating as always. Huge pleasure talking with you. I know that you have that new installment on the Kubrick film coming out soon. Can you give us a little bit about what that's going to expand on at all?
Yeah, I'm gonna basically. I'm contractually, I can't put out the film until 6 months after the last Avatar comes out, and I keep waiting for the last Avatar to come out so I can put out my other films. And so it's kind of frustrating, but finally the last Avatar is now coming out, so I can start finishing it up. But basically, I'm going to expand on some of the lunar stuff and show you. I'm also going to show clips from 7 different Hollywood films, which absolutely prove that Hollywood knows that the moon landings were faked and that Stanley Kubrick did them, and they're putting things in the movies to make fun of us and our own stupidity. I'm also getting into the only person that Stanley Kubrick admired in Hollywood, Walt Disney, and I'm going to explain to you not only did Stanley Kubrick know why Walt Disney was so hated by Hollywood, but I'm going to show that why Walt Disney was so hated and prove beyond any shadow of a doubt that Stanley knew why and actually featured the reason in one of his movies.
Wow. That should be interesting because I know there are some conspiracy researchers who put a lot of blame on Walt Disney and Disney, but I think that might have just come later with the Disney Corporation, how they've bastardized it after Walt Disney died.
Oh no, the establishment has been after Walt Disney since he did his little deed, which you'll have to wait until Kubrick 3 comes out. But as soon as he pulled his little deed, he was universally hated. Anybody in the conspiracy world who is ratting on Walt Disney as a bad guy is going to have words.
I'm sorry, you cut out right there. Anyone who's ratting on Walt Disney is going to have to
eat their words.
Right on. I can't wait for it. Should be very exciting. I always like your work. And before we go, would you like to give the people your website or anything else they should know if they want to get a little more Jay Weider in their lives, or maybe where they can check out The Last Avatar?
Yeah, The Last Avatar movie.com. SacredMysteries.com has all my films, including Last Avatar. JayWeidner.com has all my crazy articles, which are all for free. And I'm actually programming on an online Netflix right now, so you can check that out at GaiamTV.com. That's GAIAM as in mother, TV.com. I'm producing all sorts of programming for them, which I think you'll all enjoy.
Awesome, man. Well, much appreciated. Keep fighting the good fight and take care of yourself out there.
All right, Greg. Thanks for calling.
Damn, people. There it is. Jay Weidner.
Hey, I'm good, Mel. How are you?
Excellent, and I can't believe it's been 3 years, but after that last interview we did where the audio got completely deleted and we had to re-record a month later, I'm hoping that things will go well now. I have different recorders at the same time, a lot of redundancy here so that we have a great show. At any rate, Jay, a lot of stuff happening these days, but I wanted to ask you, because I know you're good friends with Jeff Rentz. I know Jeff, I believe he got into a car accident lately. Can you tell us what his status is?
Well, yeah, I just talked to Jeff last night. I was really worried about him because we have a kind of a pact between us that if we don't hear, if I communicate with him or he communicates with me and we don't hear back within 24 hours, that we need to push the emergency button. And I was about to push the emergency because I had called him and I had written and emailed him, and I wasn't getting any response, and I was almost ready to get on a plane and fly to Oregon. And finally, last night, I got a call from him right before he went on the air. He'd been in the hospital again, the second time around, from his horrific car accident. And, he's not a young man and got a broken wrist and bruised ribs and a cracked skull. And it's going to take him a long time to recover. And, if you believe in a creator, you might want to impart tune to him to help Jeff, because Jeff needs all the help he can get right now.
Well, that's good that he called you. So hopefully, Godspeed to Jeff Francis. He's a good truth warrior here.
He is.
Well, it's interesting how a lot of this happens, especially when a lot lately, people are questioning what they're seeing. The Baltimore riots. Let me just read this. Somebody sent me this morning, and I want to start with the hardball. Not a question, but just want to get your take on this. Walmart's closing on the border. Ammunition shipments, jade helm, FEMA coffins, ammo buyout, billions of hollow points. It's all falling into place. They never planned to, quote unquote, enslave us or put us into indefinite martial law. They spent heaps of money we don't have. Now they're spending even more to assure our, quote unquote, safety in the coming war. Spend all that monopoly money as quickly as possible on hard assets so when the reset happens, you're set. A reset is coming and everyone knows it. This leaves us vulnerable while we deal with our own people, riots, looting, killing, etc. They've been training so that when this final world war happens, they can keep their pieces in place. Your thoughts on Jade Helm and all of this, Jay?
Well, events are culminating here, and it's kind of unnerving to watch it because here's what's happened: is the Mayan calendar, there was going to be this great awakening that was going to happen in December 2012. And I think a lot of people are, very disappointed because it didn't seem to happen. Well, my argument is it did happen. It didn't happen on a widespread level, but what happened was that a week before December 21st, 2012, an event occurred here in the United States called SIC. And from the get-go, people who are perceptive knew that there was something terribly wrong with Sandy Hook. And, I went through my own iterations. First, I insisted that we shouldn't entertain outrageous conspiracy theories, to quote George W., and that people really died. As I investigated and as I watched the cover-up of Sandy Hook go on, I began to realize that the people that I thought were really serious whack jobs, saying that it was all a fake and that they were using actors and that nobody died and everything, I slowly evolved to that position. A very painful evolving. I did get to that position. And then what happened was, it wasn't just me, it was a lot of people had to evolve to that position. We began right on the heels of Sandy Hook. Then came the Boston bombing in April, and that was like the hurrah for everything. Because once we deciphered what really happened, the Boston bombings, and I think it was a real mistake for whoever did this to put two events that close together. It's a mistake that they're going to pay for eventually. I guess you call them the conspiracy community, reached the unnerving conclusion that not only were these events complete fabrications, but there may be a lot more events going on that are completely fabricated, both presently and in the past. And so, people started going backwards in time and looking at other events and seeing if they had the trademarks that Sandy Hook and the Boston bombing had. And lo and behold, yes, they did. Several events in the past that we think are rock hard reality are in fact not. They didn't happen. They just told us that it happened. And so we're almost drifting into a kind of a theatrical reality here, where the powers that be are using events, theatrical events like the Boston bombing, to establish a precedent within the trial. So Joker, the kid that helped his brother with the Boston bombings, his name is pronounced Joker, by the way, and everybody's pronouncing it wrong. They're pronouncing it Tzokar or whatever. But
Sarnetz?
It directly translates as Joker.
Interesting.
The Taz, yeah, and so happening here is Joker goes to court, and attorney announces in her first sentence that he's guilty of sin and that he did it. I mean, it has to be the worst attorney I've ever seen, because there's a plethora of evidence that the guy didn't do it, photographic and video evidence that he didn't do it. What's interesting about it also, well, first I want to get to the precedence. So a precedence is established here in court. Now, it's a kangaroo court, it's a theatrical court, but the precedents are still being established. That is endgame for all of this, to create a plethora of laws that bind us through theater. And they're continuing to do it. The shooting of Walter Scott in South Carolina. I mean, I'm not alone in thinking that is not a real shooting. Even Dick Gregory has come out and said that there's serious problems in that killing. And he fires 8 shots into the back of the running away young African American, and there's no recoil on the gun. He doesn't go into police stance like you're supposed to doing a shooting. There's certain rules that police have to follow. He's just shooting like he's a crazy cowboy. There's no recoil on the gun. There's no smoke from the gun, and there's no blood on the victim, even though he was shot 8 times. And I got real problems with that. And so then the question, I'm sure many of your listeners, okay, so what's the point of all this? Why are they doing it? And the point of it is to cause cognitive dissonance, to make you confused, to make you not understand what's going on around you, to keep you in the dark like a mushroom. And we've got to. I don't think they ever gambled on cell phone cameras and the internet and our own innate intelligence. And so now almost a game has started where they do an event and then 100,000 researchers on the event immediately, all comparing notes, all talking to each other over the internet, all perfecting their point of view as time goes on. And I think that is what's leading up to all the things that we're going through now. They realize that if they keep going like they're going on, we're going to become fully awakened, and then we're going to demand some kind of revolution. So what they're doing is they know that this is coming. We're going to become fully awakened, at least our part of the world. Maybe I'm not waiting for a six-pack to wake up. He's never going to wake up. Or I like to call him Boobus Americanus. And
Bubba.
And so it's just a small number, but we're the leaders in this thing, and that's what they've got to really worry about. And so I think they've stepped up the game. I think Jade Helm, the Walmart, Sam Walton was in Army intelligence. Sam Walton, the guy who started Walmart, he ran, are you ready? The Japan internment camps.
Huh.
Yeah, his deep connection to the intelligence world. And so this idea that Walmarts would be used as internment places is completely consistent with the history of Sam Walton. And don't forget, he's from Arkansas, where Bill and Hillary are from. And so I believe all this stuff. I don't know if Jade Helm a pointed stick that they're poking at us to find out how we're going to react. I suspect it is. But parts of Texas pulling out of Jade Helm. Colorado has pulled out of Jade Helm. The governor of Texas has signed the National Guard to watch what they're doing with Jade Helm. This is unprecedented awareness that 5 years ago would never have happened. We would have been laughed at saying that Jade Helm was some nefarious enterprise that needed to be watched. Now we've got the governor of Texas watching it, and that's significant. There's a lot of significant things going on right now that have to have the powers that be very, very worried. Chipotle has now stopped using GMOs. That's huge for a chain that big to say no to GMOs is gigantic, and that's got to freak them out. And so at every level of their attack on us, we successfully, maybe not quickly, but slowly, successfully beginning to counter them in our arguments and in our intellectual discussions in shows like this, and that is freaking them out. And they have decided to hit the pedal to the metal to get this thing rocking and rolling faster than ever, and I think they're even surprised by our reactions to that. We're, the attack France. All this stuff appears to be coordinated. And, but again, the attack on Jeff Rense didn't work. He's still on the air. He's publishing a site. So, it's very, very amazing to watch what's going on. And I want to call, your listeners' attention to researcher that I think is really going to become one of the top researchers over the next year or two, certainly promoting his work as much as I can. So you need to go to milesmathis.com. It's MILESMATHIS. Miles is an artist and a philosopher and a scientist, and he's decided, once he saw that Sandy Hook was a fraud, he decided to start looking at events in the past to see if they were fraudulent also. And so he's gone back and you read his articles, and he's determined that the Charlie Man events were all theatrical, and I believe him. And the Patty Hearst kidnapping was all theatrical. On and on. Bomber was fake. And he's got really good evidence for all this. So I think that really has to scare him, because we're beginning to figure out things that were unthinkable just a few years ago.
It's interesting you're saying this, because I know for a fact, at least for my part, I think, and for my listeners, that even though we may not verbalize the fact that we believe there's an awakening taking place, it's happening. We just don't know how to verbalize it, but it's happening. The GMO part and all these false flags that are taking place, we know that they are staged events. We see they don't even make it a secret that they're casting for actors these days. But what about since you're talking about the Boston quote unquote bombing, what about the video where the older Chechen brother is shown naked and handcuffed, being escorted into a police car, and shortly after he was shown dead and pretty much massacred?
Yep. And also their friend that was being interviewed by the FBI in Florida. And 2 hours into the interview, they shot him. And so what they're doing, of course, is they're batting cleanup. And we don't even know if that kid that's on trial, Joker, is really even the right guy. His friends say that doesn't look like him. So he may have died, and they just got some lookalike to get up there. The whole thing is bizarre, because he's got hair, really long hair, and they just don't let you have hair in prison.
That's right.
Yeah, so it's like, what's going on here? Like, you can't have beards in prison, yet Charlie Manson has a beard every time they trot him out. He's got a beard. The reason they don't let you have beards is because you can hide stuff in them, by the way, under the chin especially. And so these things are all problematic, and the Internet has connected us so well together that we can run off and check on anything now. And, it's almost like the Three Stooges. These guys they're really not as good as they think they are. Then their view of what we are is, they think we're just idiots, and they dismiss everything we're saying. I think that our voices are growing, and they're growing so loud, so quickly, that they're getting extremely unnerved. And I had a dog corner in my basement one time, a stray dog. And I found out then why people say you never want to corner a dog, because it is a very, very vicious thing to have a dog cornered, and a very difficult thing to figure out how to get that dog out of that corner without killing you. And And I do believe that's what we have here. We have a cornered dog, and he's vicious, and the saliva coming out of his mouth, and he's going to snap at us, and he's going to try to kill us. And I think, Hastings murder and attempted murder on Jeff Rense and Breitbart dropping dead in his front yard. I think all of these are hits. And I think there's a hit squad running around the country. I don't know what for. I don't know what their goals are, but I do believe that's what's going on. And they're desperate. They're seriously desperate. And this stuff is now leaking in to the mainstream, which is what they really don't want. And I would bet my bottom dollar that there's going to be a feature film coming out which is going to touch on the falseness of our reality. And in some ways, this movie, The Imitation Game, kind of did that, but not all the way. So I'm sure that the zeitgeist of culture is going to create something, because I think the growth of the knowledge that these events fabricated is astonishing how fast it's across the body politic. And I would have never thought, here it is, we're coming up on, 2.5 years since Sandy Hook, and it has spread, and almost nobody that I know believes that Sandy Hook took place. You can almost judge somebody's perception by whether they think it actually happened or not.
And a lot of people just keep silent because they don't want to look like conspiracy theorists. But in silence, they do their own research. And I've done my research, about this. Let me ask you this: Sandy Hook, property taxes and purchase price of a home. This is public information, and anyone can access this information in any county. And I found out, you may know this, that many of the homes surrounding the Sandy Hook quote unquote school were purchased at $1. Did you hear that too?
Oh yeah, $0 on Nancy Lanza's house was $0. Yeah, and who knows? What I think actually is going on with this is that Newton is a CIA town. I think the whole town is, and maybe not everybody, because I actually have seen sincere witnesses. They were fooled, but they were sincere. And so a lot of the town is just Sandy Hook is probably CIA. And once you understand that, you get the rest of it. So it's kind of an amazing thing. And this wake up is, wow, I just don't even know where it's going to go. It's like, okay, we're this wake now. Where are we going to be in 2 years? And I'm sure the powers that be are thinking that too. Like, what's going to happen here? And even Dave Icke, who isn't part of the whole thing's fabricated group. Even he looked at the videos of Charlie Hebdo and really began questioning whether that was a real event, which I don't think it was. And so even people like David Icke are now starting to get on board, and it may go mainstream is what I'm thinking.
But here in the United States, it seems that the common denominator of a lot of this is, number one, of course, to vilify the Muslims, and number two, to disarm the population. Do you think that they're really exacerbating this by all these false flags, where a lot of the, I guess in this case, the left wants us to just give our arms and just say, that's it, we don't want any more weapons around us? Or do you think that there's some sensible people out there that finally will say the United States is the last bastion of freedom still left, and you cannot just give your weapons?
Well, I certainly hope that. I'm not giving up mine, and I don't think anybody should. It didn't work. I might point out, Sandy Hook did not work. They thought it was going to work, but it didn't. And so now Obama's thinking about putting an executive order, which is just BS. The guy's a friggin' dictator. I don't care what anybody says. And I don't think he's going to run. I think he's going to run for a third term. I don't think he can risk letting this thing that he's done be reversed. And if we don't reverse it, we are going to be in a left dictatorship, fascist dictatorship, very soon.
Well, the Tucson shooting too. You probably. I was driving to pick up my wife and my daughter, who were having breakfast in front of that Walgreens where the event occurred. So it did occur. However, how it's presented by the media is another thing. I think the reason why that occurred was because they needed to kill Judge Roll, the judge that was killed. And I don't know if you ever read the postmortem, the pathology report. It says cause of death, blunt force trauma to the head, and he was shot in the stomach. What's your take on that?
That whole thing is just one of the most bizarre of all the incidences, because it does look like Giffords did get shot, but it doesn't look like it is. It doesn't look like the event happened the way that they're telling us it happened. So I don't know. I do believe that event is at least partially faked. And again, the guy that did it, he looks like he's ex-military. We have pictures of Gabby Giffords at the shooting range with her AR-15, with her husband, who's a NASA astronaut, which is also a red flag for everybody. And yeah, I mean, it's theater. Some of the theater has aspects of it that are real. 9/11 was half theater and real. There's a lot of researchers that are going through the list of the 2,900 people that died, and having a lot of finding the families of a lot of these people. And so it may be that only a few hundred died in 9/11. We just don't know. The theatrical nature of everything is just, very much, we're beginning to question everything. I'm beginning to question whether there were even planes involved at all. I have a lot of problems with it. For one thing, I've been told by air pilots that you cannot fly at 500 miles an hour, 200 yards from the surface of the Earth. The air pressure is just too much. It would just blow the plane apart.
It's like
you
water.
couldn't even do it. Yeah, you couldn't even do it. And then when it hits the building, the second plane hits the building, there's a little problem. And that there's two problems. One, and I've done this, I've taken the clip and I've slowed it way down, and there's no debris coming off that plane as it hits the building. There's nothing, no bolts, no little pieces, no glass. There's just literally nothing falling from the crash at all. And two, if you measure the distance that the tail is moving frame, you see that there's absolutely no resistance. That tail continues to move at the same distance at the same time, even though the front end is smashing into a building. That is impossible too. And the third thing, which I think is the piece of resistance of the whole thing, is what people don't realize is that the back of an airplane going in the opposite direction is a wind that is moving as fast as the airplane. And this actually causes problems for airplanes that are following other airplanes because they get the wind, and it can cause all sorts of problems. And so what should have happened when that plane entered into the building is all scrap should have been flying out that window because there's a 500-mile-an-hour wind inside that room. So there should have been file cabinets and phones and people and just flying out the window. All the windows should have broken, and yet it goes in like a Roadrunner cartoon. The Wile E. Coyote hits the rock and it goes through a wall.
Knife through butter, too.
Yeah, and it's just like, really? You expect us to believe this? And another thing, by the way, that as a filmmaker, I can see and want to relate this to your audience, is that when there's a real explosion, like oil refinery or something blows up, you get a lot of black smoke, you get a deep red explosion. And it's not very spectacular, honestly. But the explosions that are in the Boston bombing and the explosion of the plane when it hit the building, they have a bright orange glow to them. And that was my first signal there's something wrong. Because when we make movie explosions, we use gunpowder, not very much, just enough to cause a minor explosion. But to make it look really good, we add a little bit of phosphorus to it to give it that nice orangey glow. Has nothing to do with the explosion, it just looks good on film. And the white smoke is also an important indicator that there's something fake going on here. And so when I got home and watched the Boston bombing, I knew it was a fake from the minute I saw it. It was the bright orange explosion and the white smoke that was going up. And also, there wasn't loud enough. The problem with movie bomb is that they're really, what a movie bomb is you take like a piece of, say, 6-inch in diameter, or 6-inch PVC, and you seal up, say you have it's 2 feet long, and seal up one end of it. Then you put your powder and your ignition device in the bottom, and then just throw a bunch of styrofoam on top of it, right? Little pieces of broken styrofoam, so that something is moving when the explosion happens. It just makes it look better. And you can see in the Boston bombing, that's exactly what they did. And they had a really loud explosion that sent everybody running who wasn't part of the theater. That's what I would do if an explosion went off next to me, would run, as you probably would too, and as everyone would, anyone with any brains. But, a lot of people didn't run. So why didn't they run? Well, because they were all part of the theater. And the cops come and they stop anybody from getting close. If you watch the explosion and then you watch the aftermath very carefully, you can see that someone's got a machine inside the crowd. And there's all this smoke, and you can't see what's going on for the first minute or so, 2 minutes maybe, because there's a smoke machine going on. And then finally the smoke clears. Why there's smoke, I can't figure it out. There's nobody on fire. And then the scene is all laid out. We've got your cherry red blood. They have
to put their makeups on, Jay.
Yeah,
that's why the smoke is there.
With the prosthetics. Yeah, exactly. And then there's the other problem. What people don't realize, and most people don't realize, is that blood only stays very red when it's exposed to oxygen for about 15 minutes. And then it starts turning brown.
That's right.
And that blood never turns brown. And again, that's a problem with movie blood. It doesn't turn brown. It's not real blood. And I've dealt with movie blood my whole life, and that's movie blood. It's not even sprayed very good. And the upshot of the whole thing is that the guy that lost his 2 legs, Jeff Bauman, and then he made an appearance at the Boston Bruins 3 weeks after he lost both legs. To anybody who's ever lost a leg, the melancholy that you get from losing a limb, it's huge. It's like years-long depression. It's like losing a good friend. And to see Jeff Bauman with his full health, in the wheelchair, waving at the crowd, smiling like he's a politician, that ain't going to happen. Just like you can't put Jeff Bauman in the wheelchair with a tourniquet on him and push the wheelchair 2 blocks without one drop of blood.
Yeah.
It's impossible. But here's the upshot. Who's the only person on earth that claims that he saw the Tasnerev brothers put that bag down onto the ground? Jeff Bauman, the only witness.
Let me ask you this, Jay, and this is a question that not a lot of people dare to ask. And believe me, folks, I get grief all the time from emails, and I explained that I have nothing against the people that I'm going to talk about. Adam Lanza, Sandy Hook, James Holmes, Aurora, Colorado. And if we go back to 1996 and Columbine, Dylan Klebold, Jared Lee Loughner, Tucson, what is the common denominator here? And Bauman too. What is the common denominator here, Jay? They're all Jewish.
Are you kidding me?
They're all Jewish.
Right.
And the same thing is with the elderly man that was interviewed again and again during Sandy Hook. What's the common denominator? He's Jewish. So, exactly. So, I hate...
And Soto was, the T. Soto was also Jewish.
Yes. So I have absolutely nothing against Jews, but I question why all of this is quote-unquote perpetrated by Jews. What is it? What's going on? Are they trying to take over the United States? And the only way that's going to happen is if they disarm the United States? Is that why? Is this the end game?
I think it is. Yeah, I do. I think it is. Jews are very theatrical people. My wife's Jewish, and they are. They're so. What would they do? Of course, they would do theater. That's what they do. If you the vaudeville theater in the U.S. in the early 1920s and 30s, that was all Jewish. All that was Jewish, and so there's really kind of a theatrical nature to. Now, I'm not saying all Jews. I'm just saying the Jews that are involved.
Right.
Yeah, and it may be. It may be that they have. I'll say this. I like Jews. They're very smart people, but they have a prejudice about people who live in between the coasts of this country. And I've heard them talk about the people who live in between the coast. Of course, they don't live between the coast, but they talk about the people who live, like in Colorado, as if they're savage animals almost. And even Mayor Bloomberg, who spent $5 million of his own money in my state of Colorado to get gun control passed.
Yep.
Okay, he successfully got control passed, and then we rebelled, and we started throwing out everybody that voted for it, and we did throw them out, and now we're reinstating the gun laws that were before Bloomberg. So Bloomberg just wasted all of his money, really glad to hear, by the way, and then when he's in a press conference about 6 months ago, and they say, hey, you spent all this money to get gun control passed in Colorado, and now they're throwing out all the people in the legislature who supported you, and now they're repassing the laws that you got, written on the books. They're taking them off the books. And, this is what Bloomberg said. He said, people in Colorado are a bunch of hicks. They don't even have paved roads there. And I wanted to put that clip up and just repeat it over and over. This is how they think of us. I'm not saying the Jews. I'm thinking the elites. This is how they think of us. And by the way, Mayor Bloomberg, we have paved roads in Colorado, and we're not all hicks. And it just irritates the hell out of me. And they have a deep prejudice against us. And so what I've learned is that especially the left, when the left says a word or uses a term, you can bet that they really mean the opposite. So if they call you a racist, what they really mean is they hate your race. If they say that you're using hate speech, what you're really doing is saying hate. And this goes on, and I think that is wisdom, to know what the opposite of that. When somebody's telling you something, they're really saying the opposite. And I'm going to get back to Sandy Hook here for a second. Noah Posner is one of the victims at Sandy Hook. His mom, and I'm going to forget her name, but maybe somebody will help us. His mom was reported to be a nurse when the first reports came out, and he had the only open casket funeral at Sandy Hook. Okay, so we now find out that, in fact, she's not a nurse. She works at the Swiss consulate in New York City. And what does she do at the Swiss consulate? She is passing gun laws for Europe. Everywhere you look, you find that they're all all interested in getting guns illegal. And that is the whole point of Sandy Hook. And Noah Posner's father, Lenny, he will sue anybody who tells the truth about Sandy Hook. Now, those suits have never, they've been dropped, but it's the threat. So I invite you, Lenny, to come and sue me. I'd really invite you to do it. I will go to court. I will not drop it, and I will prove that you're a damn liar. And but he won't do it because he knows I'll prove it. And so we're in a very precarious place right now where we are discovering how they're manipulating us in a very deep and profound way, and they know it. There's a movie called The Mothman Prophecies, which is a very good movie. And the hero of The Mothman Prophecies can't figure out all the high weirdness that's going on around him. So he goes to an expert to find out. And the expert says something, I forget his name, he was a really good actor, a British actor, who played Terrence Stamp, I think was his name. He's now dead. Anyway, he says, "Oh, don't you realize you noticed them? And I noticed that you noticed them." And that's kind of where we are right now. We noticed the demons, we've noticed the archons, and they have now seen that we've noticed them. And so what happens next in this game is going to be extremely interesting.
Wow, this is a mouthful. Let me start. Oh, by the way, folks, I usually read a lot before an interview. I watch a DVD, read a book, but in this case, I just wanted to bring Jay and discuss everything that matters, what's on his radar, what's in our radar. And that's why I went to a lot of you around the world who submitted great questions. And here's the first one, comes from Bill from Middletown, Ohio. Dear Jay, considering the current world stage in 2014 and moving through 2015, how do you see the events unfolding relative to your research of the Cross of Henday? I don't expect you to be a prophet, but I'm sure you have an opinion. Thanks.
Well, I do. As you guys have noticed, there's been an awful lot of fireballs in the sky lately, more than has ever been in my life. And in fact, in the first 30 years of my life, I think there was probably more than 3 fireballs that were seen. But now, happening once every 3 or 4 weeks, including the one in Russia, which was huge. And so what's going on now is that, well, next year, or is it this year? No, I think it's this year. Graham Hancock's sequel to Fingerprints of the Gods is coming out. And I've got some skinny on it, which is incredibly fascinating. And what Hancock is going to describe in this book is that through research, mainly looking at nanodiamonds and other things that are all over the world, geologists have concluded that a comet hit the Earth 13,000 years ago. It broke up into 4 pieces, giant pieces, and then as the pieces started getting nearer and nearer to the Earth, they began breaking up into hundreds of pieces, and the Earth was literally showered with a comet. And this hit 13,000 years ago caused what we call the Younger Dryas, which geologists say was a 1,600-year-long period where the world was thrown into the worst ice age that we've ever seen. Thousands of species died. Even people as far south as Iran were complaining about how cold it was. And even the equator was chilly and cold. And almost everything on Earth died. It's not until just recently that we realized 2 things. One, the civilization that catastrophe destroyed was much more advanced than we ever dreamed. And 2, the catastrophe itself was much worse than we ever dreamed. So for 1,600 years, the world was thrust into this freezing cold, and then the sun exploded into a CME, probably an X class, and immediately, overnight almost, ended the Ice Age. And if you go to the sun panel on the Cross of Henday, you see an expanding, exploding, angry sun surrounded by 4 objects. And whoever built the Cross of Henday successfully describes the catastrophe that happened. It's a double catastrophe, just like Fulcanelli says. And the catastrophe is the four objects that are on the outside of the sun, and then 1,600 years later, the second part of the catastrophe when the sun blew up and melted all that ice that had been built up for 1,600 years and literally flooded everywhere. And sea levels rose 300 feet, and all of the civilizations that had been built on the coastlines of the world disappeared, never to be found again. And I believe that a remnant survival group of that civilization, that previous seriously advanced civilization, went to the Giza Plateau and built the Giza pyramids and the Sphinx the Sphinx was built as a commemoration of the time of the catastrophe, because the Sphinx is pointing towards Leo, and the catastrophe happened at the time of Leo, and of course Leo is a lion, and the Sphinx is a lion, and then they ensconced their incredibly advanced knowledge onto and in the pyramids themselves, which we have since lost when they stripped all the limestone covers off the pyramids in the 800s and 900s to build mosques in Cairo. And so we lost all that information, unfortunately. There's still enough information at Giza to draw some certain kinds of conclusions, and so it's still a useful body of monuments. But the hopeful thing about all this, especially the Cross of Henday, is that if the Cross of Henday was built 400 years ago in early 1600s, as we suspect from the erosion on it, then that means that this group that built the pyramids, that has this knowledge, was still around 400 years ago, and they put it into the Cross of Henday. And that makes me very hopeful that, this group might even still be around and maybe helping us even. And so that's my answer.
Sure. And I have to say, speaking of our friend Graham Hancock, I was very embarrassed to see Dr. Sahi Hawass a few days ago attack Graham and even his wife the way he did in Egypt. And Graham and Robert Bouval, I think he attacked him too.
Oh,
and Graham,
Robert Bouval, I would sue him.
And Graham, you were a gentleman, so hopefully we can have you back to discuss all of this. And,
I hope you do, because Graham's a great guy, and he will be doing a book tour, so I bet you do get him.
Yes. He was with us a few years ago, and we met in person at a conference, and he's a great, great man. Now, this one, we're going to be jumping around. This one, hey, sure. Jay, I heard about the 432 hertz music phenomenon in one of your Veritas interviews a few years back and have worked in this tuning ever since. Okay. After recording several albums and playing numerous live gigs, I've noticed some pretty interesting stuff with regards to the ability of this tuning to affect the reality around me in a generally positive way. First off, thanks for this. It's been quite a trip thus far. Second, have you done much experimentation with this tuning since you came across it, for example, by using 432 hertz tuning for the scoring or music selection in your film projects? If so, what has been your experience? Cheers, Josh from Canada. P.S. Sorry, that's too long, but the fallout from that interview quite literally changed my perception of reality and my course in life forever. Had to throw some props. And Josh, let me just say, I've listened to some of your music. I'm going to put some on our show. You are a great musician, and I really enjoy the fact that you are making all your albums now 432. What's your take on that, Jay?
Well, yeah, of course. I'm completely with the question and the 432 being a superior form of tuning. And I would love to hear your music, Guy. I really would, because I'm really fascinated by all the 432 music that people have been sending me, because apparently it's caused quite a stir out there among the musicians who didn't know about it. So kudos to you, Mel, for helping me bring that up. And yeah, I think the 432 is really interesting. I have a friend who's a wonderful musician, and she tuned her piano, if you can believe that, to 432. And she plays classical music, so she'll play like Chopin, right? Only it's completely different when it's in 432. Mm-hmm. It doesn't even sound like Chopin anymore. It sounds like angelic beings speaking to each other almost. And there's this weird weird thing that happens. I don't know if I could say it's in my heart, but it's an emotional thing that happens to me when I listen to 432 music. Tears well up in my eyes. I feel this immense, almost like an ecstatic state happening to myself, and I can't get enough of it. That's why I would love anybody who wants to send me your music, please. I would love to hear it because I'm fascinated by this whole 432 thing. And furthermore, what people don't realize is that 432 was the music of this previous civilization. Okay, they didn't use what we had. And 432, the number, is a sacred number. So the sun is 864,000 miles wide, right? That's 864. That's 432 twice. 43,200 years ago, we believed that there was a substantial event here on Earth. Graham Hancock believed this, that actually was when this civilization actually reached its pinnacle. And all of the measurements around the Great Pyramid and even Washington, D.C. and Stonehenge are all based on this weird 432 pattern. And as a person that you should interview, by the way, is a guy named Randall Carlson. I don't know if you know who that is, but
no.
He is one of the most fascinating people around, and he has figured out the language, the mathematical, geometrical language of this previous civilization, and it's mind-blowing. And by the time you get done spending an hour or two with Randall Carlson, you're almost convinced that there has to be a God, because it's impossible for any of this to have happened accidentally. And I'll get you his info if you like. And
sure.
You'd be fascinated by the guy. And so all of this is an attempt, I believe, by our broken culture, our broken civilization, to try to revive this ancient civilization that was really friggin' cool. And 432 music is at the center of that, because if we can change the music, we can change the culture. And the powers that be know this. That's why they own the music business. They're changing the culture through the music they're releasing, and their music sucks. And so we need to come up with our own music and go to 432, which they do not want to ever have happen, because it unlocks certain centers in your brain and makes you, I don't know, not more intelligent, but more enlightened, I guess.
No, there's a logical explanation to all of this, Jay. And this, before World War II, this is the way music was tuned to. But a bunch of powerful forces got together and decided that the international tuning frequency would be 440. And folks, I'm just going to send this out there right now. There's one book titled The 440 Enigma, written by L.C. Vincent. And he has been very, very elusive in the past few years, but I want to have him on the show. I've heard great things about the book. He said, quote, "This unnatural standard tuning frequency, 440 hertz, removed from the symmetry of sacred vibration and overtones, has declared war on the subconscious mind of Western man." And, of course, it was Tesla who said, what did he say? "If one should desire to know whether a kingdom is, give me 1 second. Tesla said something interesting here. If you want to find the secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. And they seem to be removing the standard in which all of this should be. And when this tuning frequency changed to 440, and people went to church, and they felt that when they went to church and they listened to the organ and the singers, they thought, "Gosh, I'm getting this religious experience." And the reason for that is that the only places in the world that kept 432 were churches. That's
right. That's exactly right. And they're still the last bastions. But yeah, you're right, and that's why you. And it's more tuned to the human voice too. By the way, so when you have somebody singing to a 432 tune, oh my God, it's like angels are singing. It's just just unbelievable. And I can't. There are no words to describe what I feel when I go to a concert and hear this kind of music.
Well, I can tell you, for those who are listening, I always repeat this whenever I mention 432. I have a link to a piece of software. You can go to our forum. We have a piece of software that you can download for free. I'm not sure if they still have it available, but you can actually take all your music collection and just import it into this little software, and you can listen to all of your music collection in 432, and you'll know exactly what Jay's talking about when you start crying without knowing why. And that doesn't make you weak, by the way, folks.
No, not at all. It's a powerful spiritual experience, is what it is. And music is, the closest thing to perfection, really. And and what a horrible thing to do. To ruin the numinous structure of music and turn it into a machine. And that's what they've done. And it's a conspiracy, folks. It's a conspiracy. I don't know why they're doing it, but they're doing it.
Well, I had a question for later in the show, but two things that cropped to mind. You know that our youth now has an attention span of 9 seconds, number one. And number two, if you play any music that's 60s, 70s, even 80s, they tune out because they don't have autotune. They think, oh, this person is not singing that great. And what they're listening to is just a voice sent through a computer to autotune it. Is that messing with our youth's mind?
Oh, yeah. That appears to me is the only reason they're doing it, is to mess with the youth's mind. And they invest so much into the music business that, it's a major weapon in their arsenal. And I won't even listen to pop music anymore because to me it just seems like manipulation, all of it. And there's some indie bands I kind of like Of Monsters and Men, but anybody that comes out with corporate music, that is all designed to control you. And we got to get away from that music. That music is deadly. And you can watch the culture deteriorating as the music gets more ubiquitous. And that's what I see in my life anyway. And I don't know what we're going to do about it, Mel. It's a big problem.
Well, let's keep talking about it.
But I like this software
yes.
you got.
I'll keep talking about it. And you know what? Josh Maitland here from Canada. Oh, sorry, Josh. Well, I guess your last name is public anyway, so sorry to disclose it. But, you have these albums. It's a precursor, and I know there are other bands out there that are doing the same thing. It's the 100th Monkey Syndrome. It only takes one more for people to realize, wait a second, why do I feel better? I mean, take Enya, for example. Try to listen to Enya or classical music in 432, and you'll feel so much better. Talk about meditation. But anyway, here's another question. Jay, I've noticed an increase in public awareness as evidenced by usage in the media, etc., of the fact that the moon landing was faked, and specifically references to Stanley Kubrick. I wonder if you've noticed the same, and if so, your thoughts on that. What you think the chances are of this becoming mainstream accepted truth? Thanks, John from Cabot, Arkansas. Let me just add this to John here for a second. I responded to him and I said, about Interstellar, the movie Interstellar. I rewatched it again the other day, and I just laugh every time they talk about how they had to rewrite the history of the United States to say that the moon landing was faked in order to bankrupt the Russians. So what's your take on what he said?
Well, as I don't think it was the last time we talked, but maybe it was. But we talked on the night of the Batman shootings.
That's correct.
I remember. And I'd gotten an email from someone who had been working on the sound with Nolan on the Batman film about maybe 2 months before our conversation. And the guy who wrote me the email said that Nolan was really into my Kubrick stuff, and that there was a lot of stuff in the Batman film he thought that I would find, very revealing. And so I was actually going to go that night, and I'm in Colorado, and I wasn't going to go to the Aurora, thank goodness. Not that it really happened. But so I was very, very interested to see Interstellar, and of course, Interstellar is an homage to Stanley Kubrick. Clearly, throughout the entire movie, the whole movie is one long homage to 2001: Space Odyssey, and so he even got in the fake moon landing on top of everything else, and so I think that Christopher Nolan is in Hollywood. He has to toe the line, but he is clearly someone who's in our camp, is what I'm thinking. And Interstellar was a very fascinating film. And the ending where McConaughey is in the Tesseract and time is separated into space, and he can see his daughter growing up, and that was just fascinating. Mm-hmm. And I thought Interstellar was a really good film. So, there are friends of ours in Hollywood, and Christopher Nolan, I think, is one of them. It's going to be very interesting to see, what he's going to do next. I mean, so, yeah, I totally think it's, I don't know. These things are all related. The Joker is part of the bombing in Boston. The Colorado shootings were done by a guy who's dressed up as the Joker. The Joker is the character from Nolan's second Batman film. There is just so many things that are so unusual about that whole thing that
and even during that movie, the Dark Knight Rises, there's a scene with a map that shows Aurora, Colorado. Remember that? Sandy Hook too.
Sandy Hook.
Is it Sandy Hook? Okay.
Yeah. The bad guy is in Sandy Hook. He points down. Gordon, Commissioner Gordon, points down, says they're right here, and it says Sandy Hook. And they're like, really? And then the production designer, the assistant production designer on The Dark Knight Rises, was from Newton, Connecticut. He died in a car accident in April 2012.
Huh. Interesting. But I thought when I watched Interstellar that I thought, what? When I watch movies like these, I think, why is Jay Weider thinking when he's watching this movie? I like to deconstruct it with him. And I thought, is he thinking what I'm thinking? Is Nolan channeling Kubrick here?
Yep, I think he was, actually. I think Stanley gets around. That's what I think. I don't think Stanley's left the mortal coil yet. I think he's got some things to say, and he wants people to know about it, and he's helping us out a little bit. I really do believe that, by the way. And I think, his spirit is still here with us. And he desperately wants people to understand what he was trying to tell us. And I think, I helped him out a little bit, and I think Nolan is kind of taking it up to the next level.
Have you made contact with him at all?
No, I would like to, but I haven't. But what's very interesting about your question is that this moon thing has spread and gone into mainstream. One of the most popular rock and roll bands right now is Imagine Dragons, and their first music video was in fact an homage to my work, and even had Stanley in there directing the moon landings, and hilarious video, by the way. And so again, it's getting in there. The leading screenplay in Hollywood right now, they have a thing in Hollywood called screenplays that are great but haven't been made into a film. And the top one right now is called 1969, A Space Odyssey, which is all about the travails that Stanley went through directing the moon landings. And the woman who wrote the script is from Colorado. I certainly hope that she didn't rip me off too much, because I'll have to sue her. She may be glad that movie hasn't been made. But we'll see if it ever does get made. But again, it is getting out in mainstream, and it's quite weird, actually. But even before I came out with my stuff, it was actually in the mainstream already. There's a movie with Peter Sellers, who was in Stanley Kubrick, two of Stanley Kubrick's movies, called Being There. I don't know if you guys have ever seen it. It's kind of a boring movie. But in the middle of the movie Being There, Peter Sellers is walking around downtown Manhattan, and looking into store windows and shops. There's this montage going on, and the music on the track is a jazz version of 2001: A Space Odyssey theme by Diodato, a jazz artist from Latin America. And as the song is, or the jazz piece is reaching its climax with, da 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 da, Peter Sellers looks through a window in a store, and there is a toy mock-up of Apollo 11. Kid ye not. And this came out in like 1980. And in the movie Toy Story, again, more references to not just the faked moon landing, but The Shining as being about the fake moon landing. So in the movie Toy Story, the first one, Buzz Lightyear, Buzz Aldrin, Buzz Lightyear,
yep,
is an astronaut, and Buzz Lightyear, thinks he's this big, great astronaut. And all the other toys are trying to convince him that he's not this great hero astronaut, he's a toy. And he's like, no, I'm not. I'm a great astronaut hero. And then one day he's walking past the TV, which is on, and he sees an ad for Buzz Lightyear, and he realizes that he's a toy. So he then walks up to a banister looking over a hallway, and the wallpaper on the banister is exactly the floor, the carpet pattern in the crucial scene in The Shining where Danny's playing with his trucks. And it's the launch pad, a launch pad 39A in Florida. It's an exact replica of the launch pad. And Buzz Lightyear looks up through the window at the moon shining on him, and he leaps to fly to the moon, and he falls to the ground and crashes and breaks. That's a crucial scene. And it's a crucial scene not only to the movie and the plot, but it's a very revealing scene. And it means that somebody in Hollywood in the mid-'90s knew not only that the moon landings were fake, but that Kubrick was showing us this in The Shining. Now, I did not come up with my interpretation until 2007 of The Shining. So I don't know. My view, this is not as secret as people think it is. And I think people in Hollywood actually have known for a long time that it's all fraud.
And speaking of good bands, Muse, Imagine Dragons with Radioactive, great songs that you have to pay attention to what they're saying. But speaking of the moon, have you seen some of NASA's press releases lately where they're working on spacesuits that are going to help our future astronauts be able to get out of the Van Allen belt? You probably have seen that. And I thought, wait a second. I thought we've done that way back ago. What are they telling us here?
Well, they've had to backtrack so fast since my stuff came out that I'm actually on the floor laughing most of the time watching them backtrack. Now the quote NASA people are saying that, oh no, we didn't go through the Van Allen belts. We went around the Van Allen belts. So I did some math. I said, okay. If to go around the Van Allen belts would mean that you would go in orbit first, you would launch and you'd go in orbit around the Earth, and then you would have to go up where the North or South Pole is. You would have to go straight up that way, and then get way above the Van Allen belt, which is like a donut shape around the Earth, and the only place you can go to get away from the Van Allen belt is on the poles, which may be why Hitler moved a lot of his stuff to Antarctica. He may have, anyway, I'll get into that later. But anyway, they're now saying that they went around. Well, that's going to add about 2 days to your trip and a whole lot of miles, and they didn't go long enough. So, not until now have they said that they went around the Van Allen belts. It's really difficult to go around the Van Allen belts. Worse than that, though, they've now discovered, back then they discovered there were 2 layers to the Van Allen belt, but guess what? They've discovered a 3rd layer 2 years ago. So those poor astronauts not only had to go through 2 layers of incredible radiation, but now we know they had to go through 3. None of the astronauts died of cancer. Only 2 are dead, even. Right now, Neil Armstrong died. I think it was Jim Lovett died a few years ago, but nobody's died of cancer. They all lived to be old men. Either the Van Allen belts are not radioactive or someone is BSing us, and I'm going for the latter.
It makes sense to me. Here's another question. Daryl from Louisiana, he asks, I would be interested in hearing more of your insights on Walt Disney as per propaganda, programming, and occult imagery in his early films. Are you still working on a film about Walt Disney? Thank you.
Yes, I am working on my Kubrick's Odyssey 3, which will be out soon. It has a huge chapter on Walt Disney. I've got a pretty different take on Walt Disney than all the other conspiracy theorists, and I'm going to present that in Kubrick's Odyssey 3, so I got to be a little bit careful here, because I'm building up a case that actually Walt Disney was a good guy, and that he was manipulated. Once the rest of the studio heads, here's what happened. Walt Disney was the only artist in early Hollywood. I mean, that owned a studio. There were other artists, D.W. Griffith, Charlie Chaplin, Mary Pickford. They were all really good artists. But Walt Disney was the only artist that actually owned a studio. All the other studio heads were just businessmen. And every year the studio heads would all get together. And, of course, Walt was the only one there that wasn't a member of the tribe. Everybody else was a member of the tribe. And they used to make jokes with Walt, and they'd say, hey, Walt, why don't you come out and play golf with us at the golf course? Oh, that's right. They don't let any Gentiles into that golf course. Never mind. They'd say things like that to Walt. It would just really irritate him. I know one of Walt's really good friends, and I have talked to many, many, many people who worked at Disney, and they tell me that he was the nicest guy, the best person to work for that ever. And so what happened is that Walt was a closet pagan, really. And, he was Irish, and his early films have this kind of Irish paganism, Celtic paganism to them. And this is what he really loved. That was what, the forest and animals and fairy tales and all this stuff. And so for the first few films, he made them on this kind of pagan values that were really intrinsic to himself. And I think that paganism really kind of terrified the other studio heads. They didn't really understand it. They didn't like it. And they began doing terrible things to Walt. First off, they organized his animators into a union, so Walt couldn't make the films cheap anymore, because he was now paying people 2 or 3 times what he was paying them before, but he was paying them very generously before this happened. So it was a kind of, the animators were confused. They were like, well, he's paying us really good right now. Why do we have to ask for more? But they successfully unionized, and that actually destroyed his animation business. At that point, Walt decided to start going live action because the animation was too expensive now, and I'm sure the rest of the studio heads breathed a huge sigh of relief because they didn't want his animation, because it made them look bad. His animations were so good that it made them look bad. And, his animations culminated in what I consider to be one of the best films ever made, Fantasia.
Absolutely.
And so I have a different take. And when Kubrick's Odyssey 3 comes out, I'm going to present some pretty shocking information that somehow has flown under the radar all these years. And I'm going to prove, beyond any shadow of a doubt, that Walt Disney was warning us about something, very seriously warning us about something, and Stanley Kubrick was trying to warn us about the same thing. Unfortunately, you have to wait till the movie comes out.
Of course, and who took over Disney? I'm not going to go there anymore. Everybody knows.
You got it.
Right?
Yeah.
So let's give Jay a break so we can break both segments into 2.